Carousel HTML. Let's get started building our carousel. In this lesson, we'll start by planning out the HTML we need and build the initial structure for our carousel. We'll do this by setting out a specification for ourselves and making sure we have the right classes and HTML elements that we can style using CSS later. To get started, open the Module 4 code file and look for folder 01 Start. A completed version of this lesson's code is in the folder 01 End. This module brings together a few things. We'll think about how we can apply animation to when classes are applied to elements, and we'll be using a bit of JavaScript to make it all work. But before we get into that, we need a basic HTML structure. In our carousel, we're going to have quotes. Each quote will need a photo and the content of the quote. To keep the content simple in this example, we'll be using one source of quotes, Bill Murray. Let's start with the HTML then. Opening index.html, we find an empty page containing just the links to our CSS files, jQuery, and our carousel JavaScript file. We begin with a container for our quote carousel. We can use this when we position our list of quotes, as well as apply a background to the carousel. We'll use a section for this, as it's likely to exist as a section of a larger page. To avoid possible class name confusion, we'll use the long quotes carousel container class. I find it's often helpful to use slightly longer class names rather than aim for brevity, as it makes it easier for other developers to understand what's going on, or even myself when reading it later. Inside our container, let's set up that list of quotes. First, the unordered list container. We give this both the class and ID of quotes carousel. The class is for when using CSS to style it, and the ID is for when we want to locate this container using JavaScript. Using an ID for the element will make locating it using JavaScript more efficient, so it's generally a good idea. For this example, our expectation is that we'll have just one carousel on the page. If we wanted more than one carousel, an ID might not be right and we wanted to make use of classes instead. Inside our UL tags, let's set out the actual quote structure. We start with the list item, with class quote. Inside this, we add a div to contain the image, and give it the class quote image. Since each of these images will act as decoration for the quote, my preference here is to set the image as a background image, using an inline style declaration. You could place the images here in image tags if you wish. For the content of these images, I'm using the website philmurray.com. Next, we add the quote text in a div with the class quote text. For the sake of this demo, I'll be setting up some random quotes I found online. Feel free to use whatever content you like. To save your searching for images, I've added some to the images folder. So here we have a list of quotes. Next, we need to think about how they'll be presented. We want to highlight one quote in particular, but at the same time let people know that there are more quotes in the list. To do this, we can set classes on these quotes to say which is the current, which is the previous, and which is next. We can add them to the quote list items like this. First, add the previous class, then current, and lastly, next. This will be the initial state for the carousel when it first loads. We will be updating these classes using JavaScript later. When these classes change, that'll be our opportunity to introduce some animation. Before we finish up with the HTML, we'll need to add some kind of UI to show people how many quotes there are, as well as offer a means of navigating them. We can do this by adding a series of bullet points, or pips, to the bottom of the carousel. We begin by adding a new section called quotes carousel pips. And again, we'll make use of an ID so that we can access this efficiently using JavaScript. Next, we'll set up another list, this time with the list items having the class pip. We could build this manually to have the same number of pips as there are quotes, but this might be a problem later if we were to add or remove a quote and forget to update the pips. Instead, what we'll do is generate this list using JavaScript. For now though, so that we can style them, we add in a few extra pips for the previous, current and next classes. This way, we'll be able to style the 3 pips to match the 3 quotes that will be visible on screen at once. So there we go. We've added a list of quotes inside a quotes carousel container. And we've set up some pips to sit beneath the quotes to show how many quotes there are while allowing navigation. Next, we'll set up the styles we need to position these quotes, as well as plan out the animations or transitions we'll need when the previous, current and next classes update.